Hey guys, welcome back to Bible Fun with the Nuns. Today we're studying Genesis chapter 21 and 22. Let's jump right in.
All right, everyone, this is finally the story we've all been waiting for almost a week now. The story of Isaac being born.
The actual child of promise.
Yeah, finally. Now, as we know, Isaac is the son of laughter and the son of Abraham and Sarah. So, Abraham keeps his promise by naming him Isaac, and I just want to point out, it's amazing how they had a child at this time. A true miracle. Abraham was, I think, 100 at the time.
And the real miracle is that Sarah had him, and she was almost 100.
Yeah. So, I just wanted to point that out because that's amazing to me.
Yeah.
So, soon after he was born, they decided that Hagar and her son Ishmael need to leave because that would have been awkward if they kept them around. So, they were very poor as they were wandering around, and Hagar, she gets really frustrated because she can't take care of her son all on her own. So, she prays to God, and God takes care of her. So it's amazing how God takes care of each of us individually, even though He's almighty, all-powerful, and the creator of the universe. So He loved Hagar. So He opens her eyes, and He shows her a well that He had dug. So she rejoices to the Lord and thanks Him. And so Hagar and her son Ishmael live a long time after, and God promises Hagar that her son would have a nation after him, a nation of descendants. So, when Isaac is a lot older, God tells Abraham and Isaac to go take an offering up to a mountain. But the catch is, Abraham
It's crazy.
has to sacrifice his own son that he'd waited over 100 years for. So this was a pretty big deal. And it's really interesting how Abraham obeys and he's like, okay, God, I know there's a reason for this and I trust you. So he goes up to the mountain, not telling Isaac what he's about to do. Well, Isaac, he's matured and he's gotten smarter over time. And he says, Daddy, where's the sheep that we're supposed to sacrifice? So Abraham gets hesitant. And even through this, he obeys God. So
What did he say? He said, God will provide.
God will provide.
Mm-hmm.
So he raises his knife to sacrifice Isaac, but then in the distance he hears God telling him to stop. So God told him not to sacrifice his son, and that He had provided a ram for him, which is like a sheep.
Yes.
So they praise God because God provided the ram for them, so He didn't have to sacrifice Isaac. So they killed the ram and they rejoiced unto the Lord, and they were very happy. All right, so Mama, take it away.
Okay, John, what's your takeaway from today?
Mine is, let me find it. Mine was, the Lord visited Sarah as He held, and the Lord did to Sarah as He promised, yeah. And Sarah conceived, and Sarah conceived, and bore Abraham's son in his old age, at the time of which God had spoken to him.
Okay, so you have anything to say?
That was
Okay.
at the beginning of chapter 21, by the way.
Okay, that is showing that God keeps His promises.
Because yesterday we talked about God saying, at this same time next year, I'm going to come back and you're going to have a son by then. And here He is keeping His promise. He's doing what He said. And I think that's amazing. And I think it's amazing that God, kind of what Jax pointed out in his recap, would even care about us as individuals. Jax, what was your takeaway?
My takeaway was when Abraham was really obedient and chose to follow God and sacrifice his only son. So, as kids, we might not know what it's like to have children, but we do have enough sense to know that's a really big deal, to sacrifice something you love so much. And then Abraham waited over 100 years just to have this son, and so it was really a blessing to him. But then when God tells him to sacrifice, it's like everything changed. But Abraham does as he's told, and I think that's amazing. Also, I want to say that God will later give up his one and only son and sacrifice him for us on the cross to save us from our sins.
So this story points us to Jesus.
Yes.
Yes.
I love that. And I love how all of the Old Testament, everything in the Bible is pointing us to Jesus, God the Son. Well, my takeaway is along those same lines. In chapter 22, we see Abraham give us an amazing example of trusting God in the ways that we talked about as we read through Psalms last month. God seemed to be asking Abraham to do something that seemed really crazy. But because Abraham walked closely with God and knew God, Abraham knew that he could trust him. Later in the New Testament, in Hebrews chapter 11, it's one of those chapters that we call the Hall of Faith in the Bible. And it goes through big people in the Bible and shows how they showed faith in their own lives. And there's a lot about Abraham in there. And it gives us a little more insight to what Abraham is thinking here in Genesis. It tells us that he knew what God told him. Remember, he said that all of those descendants, he pointed to the sky, the covenant he made with Abraham, all of those descendants, his big family that he was going to have, was going to come through Isaac. And so if he kills Isaac, how does this covenant, how does this promise from God come true? So Abraham knew that Isaac would live on somehow, whether God provided some other sacrifice or maybe God would bring Isaac back to life. But that shows us how willing to be obedient Abraham was, and that's amazing to me. I agree. We know that Abraham having a son with his wife Sarah is something that he wanted and he prayed about for a very long time. And once God gave him a son, it would have been really easy for Abraham to have held on to Isaac too tightly, to make him an idol, possibly loving him more than he loved God. And we know Abraham had a great love for God. We see his relationship with him. And this was a big trial and a big test for Abraham to see where his own heart was with God. And thankfully, we see that Abraham's heart was still fully loving and trusting in God. We see that through his obedience. Our obedience shows that we love God, that we trust in God, we have faith in God. It shows our relationship with God. And by Abraham loving God the most of all, he is able to love Isaac even better and fully in the way that God intended fathers to love their sons. We were created by God, each of us, to love God most of all, more than anything, more than any other person. That's how God created us. And when we do that, all of the rest of our relationships get better and more loving and more healthy. That's one of those things that our earthly mind, it doesn't make sense in our earthly mind. But because God created us, and because God is love, and he designed humanity to act in this way, to live in this way, to love in this way, it works out perfectly. This passage today gives us a great opportunity to do a checkup in our own hearts. Do you love God the most of all the things? Are there any things that you hold on to too tightly? Are there any people that you hold on to tightly? Y'all think about those things. Talk to God about those things and talk to your family about it. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we cannot wait to see you guys tomorrow.
Bye.